So I'm gonna be honest because I am super busy. I have not planned out a video for this week. Usually I put a lot more thought into it, but this week is the week before, so we have 1 week exactly before we leave for Tinley Park, which is a 13-hour drive for us. On top of that, we have the delivery service, we have pre-orders for the show, so we got a lot of stuff going on. But I did try and make a commitment to get more videos out and stay on a consistent schedule. So today, since I already have to do it anyway, I'm gonna bring you guys roasting with us. Now, for those of you that aren't super familiar with coffee roasting, we have our 6 kilogram Mill City roaster behind us. We're running Roast Path, which is Mill City's proprietary roasting software. So all the inputs from this roaster go into this computer, and we can regulate everything right from the computer. I can adjust the amount of gas pressure, I can adjust the air pressure, I can adjust the drum speed, all from this computer, or we have a control panel right here. And as we go through the roast, I'll show you a couple of different aspects of the roasting process. So we're not going to go into super detail about coffee roasting in this video. This isn't going to be a how-to roast coffee video, but it will give you an idea of the roasting process, a little bit of information about the 3 different phases of coffee roasting, and then show you kind of beginning to end what coffee looks like pre-roasted, and then once it's finished roasting. So hang out, tag along, and we'll show you what it's like to be a coffee roaster. First thing that we need to do before we get started is we need to clean out the chaff collector. So this is the chaff collector. It is where, so coffee, when it's roasted, it produces little parchment-y layer that flakes off, kind of like a peanut, that the shell that goes, not the hard shell, but like the little papery soft shell around like a roasted peanut. Coffee has the same thing. And so when we roast, we have to collect all of that like parchment layer, and it's called chaff. And it collects in this big, this big tall black cylinder here before the exhaust goes out. So it all collects down here. But we want to make sure that this is cleaned out after every roast. I do it before I roast every time. And so the first thing we need to do is clean out the chaff collector. So let's get started. And there we go, good as new. Now this roaster takes about 30 minutes to preheat, so we're going to preheat. I always, for the first roast, I always preheat to 450 because that gives me a good baseline to start with on this roaster. So it takes about 30 minutes to get to 450, and then after that I let it idle at 450 for about another 20 minutes just to make sure, because you got to think about this thing. So right now it's cold, right? So it is going to equalize once those beans go into the roaster. It's going to equalize the temperature between the beans and the roaster. So we want to make sure that the roaster itself has created like a thermal battery where it can give off that heat and still maintain a high temperature. So if I were just to wait for this to heat to 450 and then just immediately put the beans in, what would happen is the temperature would drop to a point where it wouldn't be able to recover and the roast would stall part of the way through. So it would essentially bake the beans instead of roasting them, and it would drag out that roast to a point where a lot of the nuanced flavors of the coffee would be gone. So that's why we let it preheat up to temperature and then idle at temperature for 20 minutes. So this thing is just started up. We've got another about 20 minutes, or about 40 minutes to go before we can roast. So we'll check back with you soon. All right, so we're almost ready to go. A couple of things before we get started. So I have gone ahead and portioned out the green coffee for this batch. So this is, I run, so this is a 6 kilogram roaster. I usually run a max of 4.5 kilograms in there. Mill City says that you can run full batches on this machine, but since I don't need to for production's sake, I like to give a little bit of a buffer to, again, like we talked about before, be able to maintain that thermal battery throughout the roast and make sure that I can hit the numbers that I want to hit. So that's nothing against the machine, it's just more for me and what I want to run. So 4.5 kilograms in. We've got about another minute before we charge. So if you hear beeping in the background, that is the roaster getting up to that idle temp. But I'm going to turn you around here and we're going to take a look at some of the roasting software. So I'm going to go ahead and get us set up with the roast that we're going to do today. So here's what the roasting software looks like just from the main screen here. So we'll talk a little bit more about it once we get a roast in there. There's not a whole lot going on right now, but I'm going to go ahead and set my reference roast. So we're roasting a Colombian coffee today. So I have a Colombian that I will essentially mirror off of, and that's going to overlay into the software and give me something to reference off of. Okay. So it's given me my target charge temp, turning point, my green to yellow range, my first crack, and then if I wanted to, my second crack, and then a drop temperature. And then you can see where it is put on the screen projected roast curve. And what I'm trying to do with this roast, and what a lot of roasters will do, their goal is to get to a certain temperature and then smoothly glide the temperature down into an endpoint. And that's what this roast curve is doing here. And then this green line here is the bean temperature. The orange line is the exhaust temperature. And you'll see this gray line will overlay with a white line as the roast goes on, and that is the rate of rise, or the amount that the temperature is rising by degrees per minute of the roast. So you'll see that go up really fast until it comes to a break-even point, and then it will start decreasing. The temperature of the beans will start decreasing rate of rise, so it will be heating less degrees per minute throughout the roast, and that's what I'm talking about. We just want that smooth glide down towards the end. So we've got everything set up and ready to go. You can see right here, we're pretty much, so my charge temperature here, my target charge is 426.6. We're right around this temperature right now. That's the bean temperature. That's the probe that is in the front of the roaster right here, that is in the bean bed, right? So that's the probe that it's reading, and so that temperature is right around our target temperature. So we're going to get ready to charge here in a second. and get to roasting. Okay, so we just started the roast. I apologize for the noise. I hope you can hear me okay, but we just dropped 4.5 kilograms of coffee beans into this roaster, so it's now spinning them around, creating a little bit of a racket, but that's okay. We'll do what we can. So we don't really do a whole lot here the first four to 4.5 minutes of the roast. Other than I always sanity check my my instrument panel, and I kind of get things set up for the rest of the roast. So I'll go ahead and name this profile so that I can have a record of it. But the first 4.5 minutes or so of the roast is called the green to yellow period. And so that all that really means essentially is that it's taken the green coffee that is going in and it's going to turn it a yellowish color. So we know when we've reached that checkpoint when we can smell the coffee and it's a kind of a baked bread smell to it. That's when we know that we've gotten green to yellow. And like I said, I expect that to be around 4.5 minutes or so. But until then, we don't really do a whole lot. We're just kind of make sure monitoring everything. So let me show you real quick on the roast curve here what that looks like. So we're just now 2 minutes into the roast, and you can see as this is the first roast of the day, our bean temperature line, we're a little bit low, but that's usually pretty typical for the first roast of the day, so there's nothing to worry about. And like I mentioned before, we've got our rate of rise right here that's starting to come up. And so we're pretty close to being on our roast curve right now. So nothing really to do here until we get to green to yellow, and then right after green to yellow, we're gonna make our first adjustment. I quickly wanted to show you the instrument panel. For this roast, I'm starting with the gas pressure of 3,500. We've got our fan speed here at 18 and my drum speed at 53. The drum speed I personally don't really mess with a whole lot. That is a speed that I've found that works well, and I kind of stick with it. The fan, I start with the fan on the lowest setting that I will be on, and then I increase it there throughout the roast. The opposite is true with the gas. So the gas is set at the highest point that it will be in the entire roast, and then we will decrease it steadily throughout the roast. We're now at 4 minutes into the roast. We're getting close to green to yellow. We can take this out. See the coffee. It's getting a little yellow, not quite there. There we go. Okay, green to yellow. So I'm just gonna come over and I'm gonna hit green to yellow on my laptop, and we're right on track for where we wanna be. So as you can see on the curve, we're pretty in line. So I'm gonna open up my markers here, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna increase my fan speed to 20. And my next adjustment here is gonna be at 623. So just a little bit on roast curves and on like previous roast performance. This is just a guide. I am constantly paying attention to the screen, and I will make adjustments as needed. I'm just using this based on what a successful roast looked like in the past. But by no means am I gonna make a decision solely based on what the computer's saying. I'm gonna be constantly smelling the beans, just like you saw, constantly looking at the actual temperatures throughout the roast and making sure that it's performing the way I want. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a fuel adjustment here because I'm anticipating as the roast progresses, this might flatten out. So we're gonna come over here and we're gonna take this down to maybe 3,000. And we're still just chugging along. As you can see, the first crack on this past roast curve was at right at 9 minutes. So we should expect something similar with this one since we're tracking so well. So we're getting close to first crack here. I'm not sure if you can hear it. We're getting a few outliers. And I like to call first crack when I hear 3 pops in a row. There we go, first crack. And so first crack is actually the moisture inside the bean expanding to a point where actually the cellulose layer of the bean expands and cracks. And you'll see it in the coffee where there'll be like a line through the middle of the bean and it cracks open a little bit. That's first crack. And at this point, so that's kind of the end of the second phase of roasting. And the second phase, it goes by a couple of different names. I call it the browning phase. You'll also hear like the Maillard phase, where you have Maillard reactions, caramelization reactions that are taking place in that roasting process. But this kind of signifies the end of that second phase with first crack. And it's just like, it's almost like a popcorn sound. It's just a pop, pop, pop. And usually at that point we're going to do a gas adjustment down and an air adjustment down, and we're continuing to ease that roast down to its final temperature and its final time. Essentially, once you hear first crack, you could consume that coffee, right? Like first crack is kind of the point where you would start to consider it a very, very light roast, or like a cinnamon roast is another word for it. Usually you're gonna, even for a very light roast, you're gonna let it go a little bit past first crack, and that's the development phase. So if you hear development of coffee, that is how long after first crack. You can measure it either in time or percentage. So let's take a final peek at the roast curve before this roast is finished. So as you can see, we've eased all the way down, and we're getting right to the end. So usually I've experienced the medium roast for this roast has about a 22 to 25% percentage here, so we should be getting very close. So I'm going to get back onto the trier, and we're going to test this one out. That's very close. Oh, that's good. Okay. And there we go. That's the end of the roast. So this is the first roast of the day. I have several more to do. I'm roasting right now, getting ready for Tinley Park, in NARBC Tinley Park. And so this is pre-order stuff for the show. So all the stuff is already sold. So I'm getting it roasted and bagged, and then I'll start roasting the stuff that is for sale. So I'll show you a little bit more shots of the roasting process, and then we'll wrap it up.